Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Recently, G7 countries met the leaders on the beach in Cornwall, and it was more, as Jill Biden said, get together, a wedding feast, no social distances involved, no masking, as if coronavirus doesn't exist, giving rise to the thought in the minds of the people that if Corona is not there for the leaders, why should it be there for the common people? Anyway, I'm not talking about Corona, but this G7 met, talked, and then it was followed by a meeting in Switzerland between Joe Biden and Putin. Now, when we read about both of them, G7 and Putin meeting, the media is either all adulatory, all praise, fulsome, or condemnatory, depending on the ideology that media promotes. What are the real takes off? Was it successful? But then before we say successful, does G7 deserve to be called G7? As I said earlier, when G7 was formed, Russia was a part of it. And after about 7 years of its formation, de Gaulle said that the Canada should be there. Not because he loved Canada, but because he wanted to promote Quebec. So Canada became a part of G7 and then it became G8. It became G7 again a couple of years back when Russia was thrown out. At that time, these countries were the richest countries, but their GDP has reduced by 50%. It was 80% of the world total GDP. Now it's 40% of the GDP. And there are many countries which have overtaken the so-called G7. India, China, Brazil, South Africa. And waiting in the wings to take over are more countries. So why should these continue to be G7? Why not make a fair assessment? Why shouldn't India replace Canada? And why should Brazil or South Africa not replace Italy, which are very low as far as the GDP is concerned? So a G7 lost its capability to be really called G7. Then, as I said, this G7 meeting was a fun for them. Trudeau wishing to be the dean of the G7 to replace Merkel, who is going at the end of September. And then the people laughing at it. Biden's antics and foxpop have become proverbial, and I wrote about that. Now, in the meeting itself, there was a difference between the words that were talked about and the action taken. Now, Russia was condemned roundly, absolutely. But when they wanted to take an action, Merkel said no action against Russia for the simple reason Russia is building Nord 2 oil pipeline. And since Joe Biden did not want to annoy Merkel, he said, okay, we will not do anything. So the news today is that they're going to increase sanctions, but G7 as such has not taken further action. And then this also showed the hypocrisy of USA. It objected to Nord 2 pipeline, but itself it has stifled two pipelines, which are very important for Canada, especially for Alberta. So whole thing was basically geared against China. Whether they'll be successful against China or not is something a matter of discussion, which I'll take up separately in one of my articles. Now, immediately after G7 meeting finished, activists from all over parked across the road, and they said that, what are you talking about? They were all gaga about environmental protection, but they failed to fix a goal for no coal use. As a matter of fact, it looked that they had talked more and they could not translate their words into reality. And this protest across the road served to highlight the size of gap between the climate reality and political reality shown by G7. The G7's failure to set up an end date on the coal was only the most glaring missed opportunity for the leaders. They could have set a new global standard on climate change, but they rejected a proposal to halt the production of diesel and petrol cars and did not even touch the multi-billion-dollar bill the developing world says must be paid for their bringing their own emissions low. So it was all talks, all sound and fury, signifying nothing. Then look at that slippery language on the vaccines. They promised 1 billion and then it came, no, it was not 1 billion, it was $840 million they promised. It created a sense of distrust with which the poor countries view the climate demands the rich countries place in the rest of the world. EU was at the same time pushing G7. There was a conflict. So EU was saying that G7 must address the risk of carbon leakage, where dirty industries move to other countries to escape higher emission standards. For example, if the auto industry is making a lot of emission, then why not shift it to, say, Africa or South Asia or, say, Nauru, where there are no restrictions at all? So that's what they were playing. And the result was that in the end, what happened? Brussels and Berlin and Paris, these three joined hands and they got an acknowledgement from other leaders. And that was only an acknowledgement, there was no commitment. That was a major takeoff. And I think this is what made Queen Elizabeth say, you have come here to discuss the issues facing the world. It looks to me that you're just come here to enjoy, not to be serious. Now, much of this plays into China's hand. And this is at the big COP26 climate conference. The world's biggest emitter of pollution today is China. 1,000 thermal plants is setting up every day. And it benefits when it can crouch among its developing countries' allies. A real offer on finance and vaccine would have split up the group. But they did not do it. So this China-controlled group is strong. It is now up to Italy, which hosts the next G20 in October, to salvage a coherent message before the baton passes back to UK and COP26 conference in Glasgow, which is going to be held in November. Second takeaway, which is talked about a lot, B3W, better word, better as opposed to BRI. And China emerged, as I said, whipping boy, whipping post. It emerged as one of the major topics of discussion in G7 meeting. 2 years on since their last physical meeting, President Xi has tightened his grip on Hong Kong, stepped up China's military presence around Taiwan. International tension on the plight of Muslims has grown dramatically. So, in very clear language, G7 leaders directly mention a number of contentious issues that enrage Beijing. They include a call for investigation into the origin of coronavirus in China, as well as endorse a $100 billion ambition to compete with China's BRI initiative. Now, while Europe was on occasion taking a hard line on China, the G7 statement would be seen that there were efforts by Washington to build an alliance with European Union and UK against it. But this was not supported by France, it was not supported by Germany, it was not supported even by Canada, because Justin Trudeau has a certain love affair with China, and despite the arrest and the imprisonment of the two Canadians for the last more than 1 year, he is not very much against China. Then one of the issues which emerged was forced labor. While the G7 countries did not call out China by name, the language is clear that they were referring to China. But the call to action was louder, real word was not. We are concerned by the use of all forms of labor in global supply chains. So be concerned, who cares? And all this was happening just as Communist Party is planning to celebrate its century in just over 2 weeks. They'll complete 100 years of their power. Third, vaccine shutdown. It took some creative accounting, including picking a pre-summit start date for the calculations. And they were celebrating the symbolic important goal of pledging 1 billion vaccines, which later on came to 840 million. Activists and politicians are less impressed by this commitment. They say it's not enough vaccines and not enough urgency. The musician Bono has started one campaign and he says G7 has not delivered. They had high potential. And the leaders of the wealthy G7 countries leave Cornwall having failed to take real action needed to end the pandemic. And this was said by Edwin, Executive Director for Africa on the humanitarian non-profit organization. Similarly, civil society recommended, and they said that without 10 billion vaccines, one, removal of patents and intellectual property rights in healthcare, pledge to inoculate the world by the end of the next year, all this commitment is hollow, meaningless. And former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown has already lined up behind the critics, and he says that G7 has achieved one thing, and that's unforgivable moral failure. Then the fourth takeout, Brexit bites. Now, G7 was not meant to take into account the issues of Brexit. Somehow or the other, the summit ended up being overshadowed by Brexit. And early signs were promising when Boris Johnson very clearly avoided a confrontation with Joe Biden when he said, look here, North Ireland issue is our internal issue, don't go with that. And Biden kept quiet. Then out of nowhere jumps in Justin Trudeau and offers his assistance in preserving North Ireland's peace process. And he was told in very diplomatic terms to keep his mouth shut. He has no business poking his nose in the affairs of other countries. Johnson was up by this, and it was very clearly stated. Some of our friends here today do seem to misunderstand that UK is a single country and a single territory, and nobody has right to say anything. So an official readout of this meeting, Johnson stressed the area of agreement, but he did not refer to the disagreements. The vast majority of conversation they had were about other subjects. Then trade is the most important thing. They did not talk about it. They just referred to it and then veered off. because they knew it's a contentious issue. US administration is already in talks with the World Trade Organization, and they want to set up a reformatory committee to reform WTO. As some leaders said, that WTO was drinking at the last chance saloon. But the impact of pandemic on the global economy should have been discussed. Most important, we are in for hard times, but no one came out of this, and neither USA nor European Union fixed the differences, how to reform WTO, how to protect the world trade, and things like that. Japan, UK, Canada, and other members were very slowly closing and finding some way, but USA objected to that. Now, this was Joe Biden's first trip, and we have seen that as far as G7 issues were concerned, sorry, five issues: trade, vaccine, Brexit, and of course, China. There was no basic unanimity. It was very fine talk, very diplomatic talk. As I said earlier, all sound and fury, bone harming, friendship, but no real result. Now come to the other part. Joe Biden's achievement. It was his first trip, and he rallied the US traditional democratic lines to forget the episode of Trump being tough. And then he offered a rosy picture of cooperation with Russian President Putin in one-to-one summit. Here's a major takeaway. They thought that Biden-Putin meeting is going to have a reset in the emotions. They did not use the reset to describe the state of relations between the two. But both men were saying, and they were taking out the clear areas of disagreement, even as they pointed to small scale areas where they could cooperate. So 90% they'll oppose each other, 10% they might collaborate. And there was a mutual skepticism. It was an abrupt return to the conventional US Russia framing after the presidency of Donald Trump, which had elevated Putin to create an aspiration that the countries would like to have partners. So, what happened? Russia returns to its place as a worthy adversary because Biden's attention is more on China than on Russia. And there's no doubt that Putin might be thinking that he's going to get Alaska back. They had a 3-hour meeting, and you could see while Biden was smiling, Putin was sober, taciturn, tone was very tough, and at times became defensive. And he very clearly said that he's not going to discuss Ukraine, he's not going to discuss human rights violations. They are the matters that relate to Russia alone. And then, Biden admitted, he said when he was boarding Air Force One, you can't guarantee anything. Nothing happens. So when the leader of the free world said nothing happens, why this meet at all? And then, another thing, the foreign policy was not clearly delineated. There is no substitute for real, meaningful dialogue. Nobody can deny it. But to say something starting with that he is a killer, and then going on to say, okay, please don't interfere. And then, last of all, the most humiliating aspect, Biden comes out with list of some infrastructure, which is requests Putin. Okay, you want to have cyber interference, but please spare these institutions. You are asking a robber, come if you want to come and rob my house, Please don't take away these 4 or 5 things. But that's okay, that's up to your sweet will. And this is what happened. USA's showdown on China over trade, security, health policies. And Biden could not use strong language, but he could not get G7 allies to agree with him. And then they said, well, it's madness, but don't call it a new Cold War. Are they hoping for a real war? And Biden pressed Putin to curtail criminal and state sponsored activity. And he said, look here, if you do not stop cyber surveillance or sabotage, we will also do that. Well, and then, as I said, a few critical infrastructure sectors, and they range from energy industry to water symptom. It looks as if Biden had gone with a begging list to Putin and with a demand list to G7. And then demand list also came to let's say something even if we don't want to do it. Let's say to give a cover that we are really doing something. Biden admitted that he discussed with Putin the possibility of cyber attack taking out one of their pipelines. And he said it will have a devastating effect. And Putin said, I'm aware of that. And I'm aware that USA has cyber capability, but we'll see. No commitment. So on both sides, there was no commitment. There was no hope that the cyber attack would stop. What happens is that we have been shocked and surprised that this meeting, which produced nothing, and the reality was that it was more for a show than for real meeting. It was more to show to the people that Biden has arrived on the world stage and Democrats can deliver something. Reality speaking, this was a non starter, and G7 reveals the hollowness of all such alliances, whether they are C7 or G20, whether they are NATO, whether they were the former Warsaw Pact, and the all talk of B3W and BRI, again, is a wishy-washy thing on the whole. Both G7 meeting and Biden-Putin meeting left a very bad taste in the mouth of the strategists, policymakers, because it was all in shambles. There was no order. It was cacophony, noise, meaningless talk. Thank you.